Hello, everyone. Welcome to Dean's Chat, where we discuss all things podiatric medicine. My name is Dr. Jeffrey Jensen. I'm the Dean at the Arizona College of Podiatric Medicine and the host for the Dean's Chat podcast. Once again, I'm joined by my co-host, Dr. Johana Richey. Hi, Joe.
Hey, Jeff.
How's your surgery class going?
Oh man, we're in the thick of it. It's awesome, but it moves quick, so I gotta stay on top of it.
Yeah, I walked by the lab yesterday and I saw all of you in there intently working, and it looks like the students were having a good old time.
Yeah, we did close reductions and put on casts and splints and lots of fun stuff.
Fantastic. Well, we have a wonderful episode for you today. Our guest is from Fayetteville, North Carolina, Dr. Asim Raja. Welcome to Dean's Chat, Dr. Raja.
Hey, thank you so much. Thanks for having me. It's an absolute pleasure. I'm humbled by the invitation. And once again, thanks for having me. It's just great.
You're welcome. It's so great to meet you via virtually. I'm sure down the road we'll meet in person. But thank you for joining us.
Absolutely.
So we are very informal on Dean's Chat. And if it's okay with you, let's just go with first names or nicknames. You had mentioned Raj. Is that all right?
I'll do you one better. Raj is perfect. Let's go with Raj. My good and close friends call me Raj. Please call me Raj.
Raj and Joe and Jeff. So welcome again. And Joe, if you don't mind doing a formal introduction.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much, Raj, for taking your time to come and chat with us and our audience about your experience. And I'm really excited about some of the things we're going to talk about today, which we haven't really gotten the chance to explore as much yet on Dean's Chat. To do your brief intro, and then we'll kind of piece some of this stuff out as well as we go. Sure. You did complete your undergraduate degree at the Loyola University and your Bachelor's of Science degree, went on to get your Podiatric Medical School degree from the New York College of Podiatric Medicine, did your residency program with the Brooklyn VA Medical Center, and then went on to do additional residency training, which we'll get a lot more information from you about, with the Womack Army Medical Center at Fort Bragg, which then you later become the director of that program. So again, so many fun things to kind of dive into. But the other things that I think are really interesting are you completed 2 different fellowship programs at various intervals through your training career. One was with one of our former guests, Dr. Edgardo Rodriguez Colazo, with the Orthoplastics Microsurgical Limb Reconstruction and Deformity Correction Fellowship, and the other with Duke University in the Orthopedic Podiatric Research and Surgical Fellowship. So welcome to Dean's Chat. I'd love to start with some of your experience. You're currently one of our service members in the military. I would love to have your perspective about what that journey looked like for you, and then some of the different opportunities that you've had with that career.
Oh, absolutely. First, I just want to say I was looking through the list of previous speakers you've had, and I tell you, it's a who's who of people I know, people I'm friends with, people, Graham Hamilton, Rodriguez, as you mentioned, Shibuya, all these people. So I'm thinking to myself, I should probably call Joe back and say, are you sure you want, me on this?
Absolutely. Because you have this network of friends, you are right there. We want all voices from Podiatric.
I see these friends of mine, like if they're Superman, I'm more of the friendly neighborhood podiatrist. I'm more of the Spider-Man type, So.
I'm totally going to start calling you Spider-Man. That's fantastic.
But yeah, no, it's a great question. I think the military wasn't something that I really had in mind originally. And, get to know people. And when I was at the Brooklyn VA, the gentleman ahead of me, my senior resident, wonderful man named Shital Pima, he decides to go in the military, in the Army. And I'm like, the Army? Like, what are you going to the Army for? I thought, mandatory service was gone. He's like, no, I've been there and I'm going back and I'm going to, join the military. So a year later, I called him up and he was in Germany. So I went to go visit him. I went to Germany. I went to visit him and see how he was doing. And I say, Joe, it was a great experience. I mean, it was very, very non-competitive. He was doing all these really cool things with his orthopedic colleagues. And it was almost like a fellowship / staff job, like he did a lot of cool things that he was learning to do. So I just considered it. And I said, what do you think if I came in? He's like, yeah, I'll get a hold of you. I'll get you in touch with our consultant. Consultant is typically someone in the military who is assigned to bring people in a certain profession and then put them into, wherever they have a need. And so that happened for me back in 1999. And I got in as a captain, Captain Raja. And I got stationed in Oklahoma, Fort Sill, Oklahoma. And it's funny because before that, I grew up in Chicago. I went to school in New York. And I never really knew why the Ford F-150 was America's #1 selling pickup truck until I got to Oklahoma. And then I figured out when I left the big city life, why,
It's too hard
so it
to
was
park
great.
in the city.
I know, my gosh, everything was, it was great. It was a military town. Military towns have typically, ease of travelability, rent is super cheap, and for a captain officer at the time, it was great. But my career basically went from Fort Sill, Oklahoma, to Fort Bragg, now known as Fort Liberty. They changed the name about a year ago. I was there, and when I got there, you know, I I felt like my first training was okay, but the military brought a whole different subset of people. My first training was more diabetic people, ulcers, that sort of thing. But you come to the military, and now you're dealing with more sports injuries, instability, fractures, trauma, that kind of thing. And I just didn't feel like I was up to speed with what I needed to know. I learned what I learned in my first 3 years in, but I just felt like, I just need to be able to pick up more on what this was. So I reached a point where I was basically done with my 4 years of service. I had a chance to leave or stay in. A gentleman at the time, our consultant, a guy named Jeff Zimmerman, wonderful friend of mine to this day. He was a consultant at the time, and he asked me what I wanted to do. And I told him, listen, I think I'm going to probably get out and maybe go back to school, maybe retrain, because I just feel like I'm not meeting the standard here. So then he offered me a spot at their program at Fort Bragg at the time. It was a 3-year program. And he said, why don't you come and join us and we'll teach you what you want to learn. So, it was his wonderful invitation and my willingness to go back and learn what I needed to learn. It wasn't done in my first program. So I said, yeah, sure. So I, reversed roles, and here I am now in the role of being a learner again. And it was great because I had some experience as staff, and now as a learner again. So yeah, that was my experience there, and I gained the skill set I think I needed at the time to be able to practice in that environment. I went to Korea for 1 year. I was in Korea, deployed, not deployed, but sent there for 1 year. And then I came back to Fort Bragg again. And this was a point where I had a decision to stay in and get out. And at that point, I chose to get out of the military. So I just did my 8.5 years in on active duty. And I transitioned to the program directorship. That's why I got out, because that opportunity came up. Honestly, I got tired of moving all the time and changing my address every 3 years. So that's when I took the opportunity. So I stayed on with government service, though, as what's called a GS employee, a general service employee. And it's really a great deal. You can buy your military time back, and it counts towards your retirement now as a civilian in the government. And that's where I was for a good period of time. And then we fast forward to 2017. And, all along, every once in a while, these people would come up that had these really bad Charcot deformities. I had spent some time previously with Brad Lamb and at Baltimore at the time. He's now moved to Florida. And I went to the course they have out there, and I saw this whole limb deformity correction course, and it was like, wow, this is really awesome stuff, like these angles and these X-rays and the deformity correction. So I was like, I really need to learn this stuff, And so I started looking to fellowships at that time, why not? It's still opportunities that are there. And that's where, thank God, Duke worked out for me. Duke had a fellowship available. It was right in my backyard. I'm in Fayetteville, North Carolina. Durham is about an hour and a half north of me. And so Dr. Michael Kerzner, another good friend of mine, was there, and he knew me. And once I knew he had a fellowship, I just kept hounding him. I think he took me because he realized if he didn't take me, it would just never end as far as my persistence. So he just gave up and said, fine, no problem. But anyway, it was a fantastic year. I met a lot of people in both the orthopedic foot and ankle world, and of course in our world. And it was a pretty intense fellowship. It was a year. It went by pretty fast, but I learned a ton. And once again, I just went back to do something that I felt I needed to learn how to do. And that fellowship also led to other opportunities. So of course, in fellowship, you tend to travel to other courses. And one of those courses was a flap and frame orthoplastic peripheral nerve course with Edgardo Rodriguez, who I knew his name. I'm sorry, I didn't know him at the time, but I knew his name because he's pretty well published. So I go to this course in Dallas, and it's one of his courses, and I'm really intrigued by this whole thing. It's different. It sort of relates to my fellowship at Duke, the Charcot frame flap thing. And the peripheral nerve was new, sort of in a sense.
Yeah.
So I meet Dr. Rodriguez there. I see him actually. The story is funny. I see him there, and I'm like, oh yeah, he's so busy. He's like Dr. Rodriguez. He's probably not have time to talk to me. I'll just probably say hi, and that'll be the end of it. But he comes up to me. Hey, I'm Edgardo. I'm like, yeah, sir, I know who you who you are. So we met off, we hit it off, and long story short, we talking about all these things that he's doing. And he's like, I have a fellowship opportunity in Chicago if you wanted to come out and hang out with me. And I was from Chicago. I grew up in Chicago, obviously, so it was my backyard. My parents are there. And I was like, really? Oh, so sure enough, I applied, and it was a traveling fellowship. So you're there for like a couple of weeks at a time, and you take a break. A couple of weeks at a time, take a break. It was a 3 or 4 month opportunity overall. And with that opportunity, I did have a chance to publish with him, and that's how I got into the whole world of peripheral nerve and orthoplastics, which was really career changing. It was really a huge field, and it's a huge opportunity for all the podiatrists watching on this podcast. You don't really know what you don't know until you realize what it is that you're not picking up on. And you reflect back to all the patients you may have seen in the past. They're like, you know what? I bet you that's what it was. I bet you that's what they had going on. So yeah, so that was my opportunity there, and then came back to Womack, and then I just transitioned recently to a position, GS position with the government at the Fayetteville VA Medical Center, and that's where I'm the current chief of service right now.
I just love
So
that story. I love the fact that you are a forever learner. I mean, that is unbelievable.
one day I may grow up, sir. Honestly, I might grow up one day but yeah, I think you just if you and I'm sure everyone on this podcast can relate to this, including yourself, is when you see something come across the horizon that you feel is innovative, it's ingenious, it's maybe not quite the trend, but you just are intrigued by what this has to hold. You have to look into it. You have to pursue it. And then you find opportunities to learn it, whether it's going to courses, whether it's meeting with people that have published on it, that you have an opportunity to meet, or whether it's actually doing some additional training. Of course, the caveat was that it was easier for me to do these things because I was in the government system. I was in the military. And so I had to get permission to do these things, but I had the opportunity to leave, have other podiatrists who were my partners at the time pick up where my patients were. I can see it being a lot more challenging if you're in private practice, if you're in something where you are the shareholder and the stakeholder of your business. But for me, that was the unique opportunity. I had great people that I worked for, leadership that believed in me. And when I asked to do this sort of thing, they gave me kind of carte blanche to say, go ahead, go ahead and do this thing. And because when you come back, it will benefit our institution, but it also benefits you as well. So, it's about the opportunity, the environment you're in, and quite frankly, keeping really good relationships with people. Just never, being level-headed, always being, sort of even keel, and never kind of doing something to show yourself as being someone who's irrational or out of control or off the chain. So those things really helped. I have a lot of people to thank for that. People that obviously not podiatrists, they're orthopedic surgeons, but they were my colleagues and my friends at the time.
So I find it interesting. Do you feel that when you were moving around, for example, when you went to Korea, it kind of gave you a break, so to speak, so that you could recharge your battery to come back and be hungrier for more education? Is that possible?
Yeah. Yeah, Korea was definitely an opportunity to see a different part of the world. I don't think I ever would have gone to Korea if it wasn't for the military. So the military has that unique aspect to it where you can travel to parts of the world that you may not normally go to. A very popular hub is Germany. I didn't go to Germany personally, but Korea was where I went. But yeah, it was a different environment there. There was a lot of really interesting people that actually Koreans that worked on military bases. They were Korean GS employees. And you learn something about the culture, meeting them and talking with them. They all spoke English, which was amazing. And they're all really very dedicated, hardworking people. There were people who worked at that hospital that were legitimately millionaires. I mean, they were really well off, but they were like, the OR clerk and the front desk receptionist. And so one day, a colleague of mine, Dr. one of the orthopedic surgeons, sorry. We went to one of our receptionists and said, listen, Mrs. Hung, you can not work. You're like a legitimate millionaire. Why do you do this? And the answer was because it's honorable, because we want to teach this to our children that it's honorable to work. Of course, Mark, my colleague at the time, stops her and says, man, we're from America. I have really no idea what you're talking about right now.
Tell me more about this honor thing.
Did you develop a taste for kimchi?
I did, but I tell you what, though, kimchi was a little bit tough at first because the minute you hit the continent or the region, it's everywhere and it's a different kind of aroma. You're not used to it, but eventually, yeah, you get used to it, and there's so many different varieties of it out there. But yeah, so that was another opportunity to see a part of the world and to see how things are done in different regions. And yeah, it was a break a little bit, I have to admit. I knew going there, I wouldn't maybe get the cases I needed for my boards at the time I was in that board collection period. But it was an invaluable experience. I really didn't regret doing it. I didn't want to go at first, but my consultant at the time assigned me to go there. So it was a fast year, but a year that I learned quite a bit in terms of a different culture, a different society, and just how they perceive us and vice versa.
That's fabulous.
I'd love to piggyback on that real quick because you brought up a really good point, a couple good points through there. Ones that you just talked about that I think would be great to kind of discuss if you're willing is building your cases for, you are board certified by the American Board of Foot and Ankle Surgeons for both rear foot and forefoot. So can you talk a little bit about what that did look like for you, knowing that there were these intervals that you maybe weren't going to be able to collect the same diversity in all of the categories that you need in order to achieve that board certification status.
Right.
Can you talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So in the military, the one thing is that when you get into the military, into a military practice, you basically have patients lined up day one. I mean, it's a huge, obviously, referral base. So having cases or having patients wasn't an issue, and getting cases actually wasn't an issue too. But much like everything else in life, it depends on where you're at and what you're seeing. So sometimes the complexity of the case may determine, who comes through your door. But honestly, Joe, it wasn't very challenging to get cases per se, but certain cases were a lot easier, for example, at Fort Bragg or now Fort Liberty. Why? Because it's the home of the airborne operations and special forces. And so there's a lot of jump injuries, there's a lot more trauma, there's a lot more sports injuries. So those kind of cases kind of rolled in. In Korea, not as much. It was pretty much bread and butter podiatry, if you will. Okay. The occasional, injury here and there, but it wasn't anything like it was at, let's say, Fort Bragg or formerly Fort Benning. I know you want me to elaborate a little bit more on like the military experience and how that plays out. So I kind of jumped across that, but yeah, podiatrists are definitely a presence in the military. It's not a large population of people, to be honest, and all 4 branches have podiatrists. There's also opportunities through other government services like Indian Health Services, where podiatrists are also there. You typically have a commitment of anywhere from 4 to 6 years, depending upon the time, the need, and the contract you sign. Mine was 7 years.
Okay.
But that's typically what you end up having to serve. Another interesting fact about podiatrists in the military is that we don't actually deploy to combat zones. Podiatrists don't have a deployable mission. So I never went to Iraq. I never went to Afghanistan. Now I have had colleagues and friends of mine who are still in the military or who are now have retired that volunteer to go, right? And they did that because it was something that helped push their career to the next level, making rank, and it looked good. And I guess they just wanted to do it. But I didn't have to do it. It wasn't part of the mission that we had. Our colleagues in the MD world, of course, they do have a mission to go, orthopedic surgeons, anesthesiologists, general surgeons, but podiatrists didn't have a mission to deploy. So that's one thing you don't necessarily have to think about. And basically after that, it's just a matter of being stationed wherever you end up going. Sometimes you have a choice. Sometimes you get to go where you want to go, and sometimes you go where you're asked to go. But the experience basically is just like everything else. The hospital is the same. You do wear a uniform, and so you do have responsibilities on the military side of the house. So you're an officer, and you're also, a practitioner. And so you have to do certain things like go to the field and train and learn certain techniques like land navigation and how to fire a weapon. And those sort of things do play into your initial training. But after that, though, basically, it's just a matter of being moved around every so often just because your time is up at a certain location. So for me, that, after a while, I got what I wanted to get out of the military, and I had the opportunity to transition, and that's why I got out. But I had colleagues that stayed in. Retirement typically is at 20 years
Okay.
if you stay in all the way. You can go longer than that if you want to, but 20 years is the active duty sort of limit. And the benefits are great. I mean, the government and the military does have great, follow through healthcare benefits and retirement benefits and that sort of thing. So that's why for me to stick it out, even as a civilian in the government system, it made sense. Although I had opportunities at times to leave the government and just take civilian jobs, but I'm in it now. I'm almost there, so I'm gonna stick with it. That sort of sums the government up as far as the military is concerned.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know you were not in the military active duty during school, but can you comment a little bit about, because I know there are some benefit opportunities for
Yes.
students considering for things like medical school,
Yep.
what those options might look like.
Absolutely. Yeah. So a good friend of mine, Ron Tallis. So he was in college. He joined the HPSP program. It's basically a program, ROTC, sorry, ROTC, which people are familiar with. And that's where the government will pay for your part of your education. And then after you finish college, then you end up serving, in the military. But the way it worked for Ron is that he did ROTC, and then he went to podiatry school. Now, during podiatry school, he would have times where he'd have to go and do a weekend or something in the military. But it wasn't until after he finished podiatry school and then after he finished residency that his actual time started in
Okay.
serving his time back. So they do give you quite a bit of grace period. But all the time, though, there are funding things that you can do, and you still have to maybe report every once in a while to certain places to train and whatnot. But yeah, his actual active duty time started after he finished his residency. So that's when he started his service and eventually got out.
Are there defined residency programs that you not really are required, but that they
Yeah.
recommend you do to stay within the military realm?
No, not really.
Okay.
I did have a program in the military at the time. I was a
Mhm.
program director for Womack, and we had one of I think there were several programs that eventually were around, but then eventually just boiled down to consolidation, and we became the primary place for military residency training. But no, you're free to go wherever you want to go. It's not preferable to come in us to see us or be in our program, but just to train. So we have had plenty of residents that we trained, and obviously people that came into the military being commissioned after their programs were done that did not train with us. They trained elsewhere. So no, it wasn't a mandatory requirement.
Awesome. Jeff, what are your thoughts or questions?
I'd like to go back before you went to podiatry school, if you don't mind, Raj. What motivated you to get into podiatry? What was your background, or what things excited you in high school and college, and how'd you end up in New York?
Well, I lost a bet. No, I'm kidding. No, actually, so obviously our origins, my dad was born in Pakistan, and my mom grew up in actually Kenya, so in Africa, but origins back in Pakistan. And if you come from a Pakistani family, you can really do one or two things. Either you can be a doctor or you can be an attorney, and that's pretty much it. And so, my mom was a big part of that decision-making process. And so, I had ambitions to do other things, and of course, medicine was a part of it. But my story really just came down to the fact that at the time I was thinking about having a profession that I thought was reasonable, that had good work hours, that I could have time for other things. That was my thought process when you're young, because you have other things you may want to do. But podiatry came about just simply because I came across a friend whose father was seeing a podiatrist, basically. And I asked what the problem was, and he had this boot on, and I wasn't sure what was going on with it. But yeah, it was just really interesting that it was just a profession that dealt with a particular part of the anatomy, and I sort of looked at that as something that was And of course, it was all encompassing. This gentleman did, surgery and everything else. So I just looked into it. I mean, it was just one of those things where I never really heard of it. And I was like, interesting, what is this thing all about? So I did spend some time with some podiatrists, him in particular, and just kind of got to see what he was doing and see how he was working. And I liked his practice. I liked the kind of things he saw and the collegial relationships he had with other professions and other colleagues. So I kind of looked in from that perspective and then kind of went from there, really. It was one of those things where I got into it. I have to be honest though, when I first got into school, I still had to gear my mind towards really putting my parents' assistance for paying for this education. And I really got into it in my sophomore year. I think anatomy, gross anatomy was really what kicked it off for me. It just started something about knowing the anatomy, knowing how to get around surgically and having implications in the future for surgery is what really interested me. So it was a surgical part of our profession. It was the actual art of being refined in the operating room, of making these decisions and being able to be really, the way you dissect, the way you observe anatomy, the way you get around things, the way you do procedures really started to resonate with me quite a bit. That's probably the number one thing that motivates me in our profession, even to this day. When I come across physicians and colleagues that are really inept with what they do and how they operate, it's super inspiring for me, even to this day. So that's really what I think set it off for me in the profession, whether it be podiatry or anything else. It was just the ability to operate and the ability to operate and do things that at times can be, not just life-changing or beneficial to the patient, but also something that really sets a standard and sets a bar and sets a pattern for our future to kind of enhance that particular field or whatever the case may be. That's why I think I've pursued it so much, even with my pursuits with other people, just every time I come to something that just seems so intriguing and it's so beneficial that you just have to learn how to do it and learn how to do it in a way that is, it makes sense to people. You can teach it and you can actually perform it and learn about it as you go along. There are times when surgeries can be very stressful, especially when outcomes aren't what you would expect them to be. And that's part of the risk of that type of pursuit, especially something that is new. It's something that's not being done a whole lot that you're trying to make efforts into. But I tell you what, it's something that you think about. I love refining procedures. I love thinking about them. I love watching other people and what they do. I love trying to make things more simplistic or more refined or more accurate, if you will. So these things are all just really part of what still motivates me to do what I do. And God willing, if I can still do it, I'll keep on pursuing it.
That's fabulous. I have a question for you. We've had other doctors come on that have done fellowships, and I think fellowships are a good discussion, but particularly Edgardo Rodriguez's training opportunity has really made a difference for doctors after residency. What a phenomenal teacher. When we interviewed him, it was a completely different perspective from typically the docs that we interview. Can you comment on Edgardo? I mean, I know he's a friend of yours, but I mean, what a unique personality in our profession.
Yes. We're sort of like very, very close and similar in our likes, and he's like a brother to me. He became really good friends really fast. Edgardo just brings a whole different kind of educational experience. He, peripheral nerve, for example, and orthoplastics, treating soft tissue like a plastic surgeon and osseous anatomy like an orthopedic surgeon, that whole concept of orthoplastics. And then, of course, looking at cases that are outside of what normally we would consider to be what we normally do, taking on these, looking at, for example, cases like non-unions and not just bringing, let's say, autogenous bone graft or dead bone, but bringing actually vascularized fibula or live bone, live tissue, muscle flaps into the area, giving good biology to an area to heal. Those are very sort of sound fundamental principles, but he brings them to you in a way that you never really thought about doing, like, yeah, maybe that's the way to go. And then it sort of resonates if you talk to other people that you respect. And like I still go to journal clubs at Duke quite a bit, and I end up speaking with Dr. Nunley and Easley and all these people at Duke. And you see them sort of speak about the same things and how that is becoming a sort of trend with their ways of treating these things. And you see how he's been talking about this for a while. And so I think the first thing that you're impressed with him is that he's been talking about this for some time now, and these things are now picking up where he's been talking about. And so when you meet him as a friend, he also kind of makes you an ambassador for propagating what he's been saying and maybe moving it forward even more. He really enjoys giving you a platform to then move it to whatever direction you move it into. And so then we published together. That was a paper that I would have never written in a million years, but he sort of puts that in your mindset that you can, look at this. And secondly, the people that he hangs out with, the people that he goes out to speak to recruit, if you will, for his conference every year, are from all over the world. I mean, they're like world-renowned people from all over. He doesn't limit himself to just one neighborhood or one area. So you meet people through him, and so your network grows pretty quickly, and you start seeing other people with their ideas and their concepts. So that's what makes him unique. He's a gentleman that when you're like someone like him, there's a wide variety of things that he brings to the table. But I think for me, what I've gained from him, and I still appreciate from him, is number one, his willingness to bring you into this world and teach you and give you the introduction to these concepts. Take it or leave it. It's up to you. If you want to stick around and still learn, so be it. And then he kind of gets you really involved with how you can apply this and how he's willing to help you with it. And his fellowship was a great opportunity to kind of learn how these things work. So you restructure. Now, one of the things that him and he would always criticize me for is that I was very much about exactly what measurement, how many centimeters, how many millimeters. He's like, Raja, this is somewhat free flowing, you have to just kind of go with how things may go. So I had to break myself of this sort of training that I had before just to see what he was trying to get at. But those are the things that I really kind of respect about him, and we still collaborate to this day. And I mean, when I go to Chicago, we go out to dinner and we'll talk about what he's up to and what I'm up to, and we'll kind of meet at a middle point. But yeah, so meeting him was really something that allowed me to see things completely differently in many ways, and really changed my practice in terms of my operative intervention, how I make incisions, how I plan them, how I dissect, and what I look for now in terms of coverage and treatment, and how I look to bring better biology to an area that needs it.
Fantastic. Joe, we got a lot of teaching to do with our students yet.
Well, and I think exactly to your point, Raj, the profession continues to advance. And if you're doing the same stuff that you learned in residency, you are going to be out of date, right? Like we know that. And so having the opportunity to seek out places where if you don't feel like you have the training to do what you are hearing about, what you want to do, finding the opportunities to go and explore that in a safe space with people that can teach you. And others are going to feel more comfortable to start exploring some of that in their own realm of safety, right? With appropriate guardrails up and such. But I really love that, again, the bits that we'll transition to some of your teaching stuff in a second, but the experiences that we have had, that I've had the privilege of knowing you now for over a year, your attention to detail, your meticulousness, when you brought that up, like it just brought a little smile to my face, because I could absolutely see that. And now having met Eduardo again virtually, so much more of the art of surgery, right? And like finding the way to blend those two things.
Yeah.
So he was clearly a big mentor to you. And you mentioned Dr. Lamb. Who are some other mentors along your journey in your career?
I think Nahuri Shibuya, Shibuya. Him and I are also great friends. A brother from another mother, basically. But we met actually over PowerPoint, believe it or not. Have you ever seen his presentations? They are chock filled with animations, not a lot of words, just animations. And I watched him give his talk, and I'm like, I had to ask him, like, how in the world do you do this? Because another big point for me, as you know, is when you give presentations, I love to be sort of at the cutting edge of giving a talk, like the way you present it, how you present it, keeping people interested in the talk, kind of like watching a National Geographic special, just keeping them intrigued. So it all comes down to the presentation too. Sometimes the presentation is a huge part of
Yeah.
what you're saying. And if you can make it flow without a lot of pauses. So he gave this talk and I watched it and I was like, I gotta ask him. So I went up to him like, hey man, I'm Raj, nice to meet you. How did you make this? So he told me about Blender and all this software that he uses. And we've been, friends ever since. That's how we met, actually. We met over PowerPoint. But he brought the entire ability and his genius. And what I really love about him is that, he has a background in fellowship and research.
Mhm.
And of course, that's something that a lot of us, there's these terms in research that we don't quite understand. We read them all the time in journals, but we don't quite get them. He gets them. And he's able to translate them to us in a way to explaining how things are. But the thing I love about his publications is that he's always looking at what we may think is a norm, what we think is true, and he's always showing that it doesn't make a difference. It is always and he's able to research that and bring it out in terms of actually publication. So, him and I, and he's a man of very few words. He doesn't really say a lot. But yeah, him and I are, very close, obviously. So he is a big influence on me. And actually, he gave me this book as a gift when I first met him. This is the How to Report Statistics in Medicine. This is one of his gifts to me. And I think I'm, in the first part of this still, but I haven't gotten the whole
Who needs
thing.
Ambien?
I know, right? So yeah, I mean, Hero's been a big part of that. Meeting people like Dr. John Rook, John Rook has been he invited me into the PI world, Podiatric Institute world. We also met similarly, and he just kind of took me in, and I was a complete outsider, but he actually opened up this door for me on lecturing, to be on a sort of a lecture circuit with various organizations. Started with PI, to be honest with you, and John Rook was a huge part of that, along with Dr. Schubert and Rock, so I owe them a lot for opening that door for me. But Tracy Vahovic, she is another individual that I'm good friends with, and she's just I'm always sending her pictures of stuff,
Yeah.
and I'm like, it's one of those things like, yeah, interesting. I'll be right back. Tracy, what in the world is this?
That's great.
When you go back and like act all like, oh yeah, this is So yeah, I mean Tracy's is a great person I met recently, but she's been a good friend, and I've relied on her for a lot of consults, just kind of on the phone. But yeah, just you're so blessed to meet these very people in your life and throughout your career that influence you and kind of shape how you go. There are people, of course, that you wouldn't know, but people in the military that helped me through my career, both in the world of orthopedics and whatnot. So yeah, these are the people that I sort of still look up to, and people that I collaborate with, that I meet with, that I'm friends with. Meeting you, Joe, I'll be honest with you, not to put you in the spot, but I mean, for a long time I wanted to be with AO, and AO went through its various ups and downs, but getting on board an AO and meeting you, and just the way that you kind of like I would say you make things very comfortable for people. You're just so welcoming, and it's like call me whenever you need to. I know I got a family and I have a busy life, but don't worry about it. I will put my life down to give you. I remember calling you several times when we first collaborated and asking all these ridiculous questions about my presentation. But I really, really appreciated your ability just to kind of like, yeah, Raj, no problem. Here's what I think. And your diplomacy, I think, is what I really appreciate, because you have that factor of how you keep things in a very sort of even keel diplomatic fashion. You get your point across. You have a way of saying things that are not at all offensive. You just have a way of relating that. And I try to be that way myself. I think we all, and so I appreciate that in people when I see it. So kudos to you too, my friend.
Well, I really that is incredibly thoughtful. Thank you. That's really nice to hear. Yeah, no, the working with the AO group has been an incredible opportunity. And your experience coming into this, your involvement has continued to bring it to a whole nother level. And again, to me, it's such a wonderful experience to meet all these different people,
Yeah.
and you are one of them. And all of the people that you just listed, it's such a small world, right, Jeff? Like all of these people, like it's such a small profession. And what I also hope is, students that are listening to this, you can get involved and you can meet people. And I think you had commented on this a while back when you had talked about relationships, and this idea that what we do on a day-to-day basis is build relationships with our patients, and we're sharing expertise and knowledge to help them through whatever they're going through. But as colleagues, we're also building our relationships with each other, and those are just as important to maintain and facilitate. So I'm glad that that's how I come across, because
Yes.
that to me
Yes.
is one of the most important goals, is connecting people and networking, and continuing to bring the best talent. And the best talent isn't necessarily the names that everyone sees everywhere all the time. Sometimes
Yeah.
it is,
Yeah.
sometimes it's not. And so
Yeah.
so thank you, I appreciate that.
No problem at all. Thank you. And yeah, you're right. It's just, I think the message for all the students that are watching, and even the residents out there, is that just look at my experience. It's not like I went to school and then residency and then possible fellowship and then worked. That's not the pattern I followed at all. I am constant. I'll go back tomorrow. If another opportunity opens up, I'm gone. I'm there, and I just have the ability to do that, I guess. And I'm fortunate that way. But the point is, you don't have to be stuck in this where can't go back. You can't learn something new. You can't, if you're intrigued by something, if you're interested in something, if you feel the opportunity to do something, you should absolutely do it. Look into the possibilities of however you want to make it happen. Sometimes there are incredible courses that are available, a weekend course. There's online opportunities. There's things of that nature, or maybe people that you can benefit from, even in your own work. Maybe you work with colleagues in the worlds of, orthopedics, plastics, vascular, wherever you can get your hands on, and they can teach you a tremendous amount. Even if you're faculty, you can always make time to scrub with them. You can always make time to learn from them. A lot of my education came from that experience. A lot of people in the military, good friend Dr. James Santangelo, who's still there, he was a huge influence on me when it came to arthroscopic procedures and arthroscopy. He kind of taught me the ropes on that. So never give up the opportunity to not just be collegial, but benefit from it. Now, it does take an effort. You have to be there for grand rounds. You have to be there for their rounds. You have to be there as part of their educational process. So they learn and they see, this guy's here all the time. He's constantly trying to, or he or she's trying to be here. So make the efforts, but the efforts are being made because you're interested, you want to learn, and there's opportunities for you to even help them out with cases that they don't want to do anymore and you want to give to you. So, you're never out of the game. You're never done. And as long as you still have the motivation and the energy to do it, please do, because these things are, and who knows what is in our future. There's something else that may come up, some other, now currently, MIS is a big thing, and MIS is becoming very popular, not just with bunions, but with Charcot reconstructions, with even with arthroscopic with trauma. It's hugely exciting. It's hugely exciting, especially in the population I work with right now in the VA. These are not very healthy patients. And so minimal incisions are a big thing, but accomplishing reconstructive measures with minimal incision is a huge part of it. But how do you do it? How do you approach it? What are, innovative ways to move about doing these sort of things? So, as the changes happen, don't be intimidated by them. Look at them, learn about them, embrace them. Sometimes there's some things that may not interest you, and I totally get that. But, but it's never an opportunity that should be missed. And you should always strive to be, and I don't mean this in like in a bad way, but, I always strive to be as good as somebody else, if not better. Not in a bad way, but in a way that keeps me competitive, And so I still feel that way. And when I come across students, I don't see it like, I'm just teaching you these things I've learned because I'm taking the back seat. No, I'm actually competing with them. I'm trying to be as good as they're going to be one day because I'm still motivated to be on top of my game. And so, that's the drive you kind of have if you want to do this kind of work. You just have to be, motivated to be as good as you can be, and you learn from people. The flip side is humility. You have to be humble in this game for sure. Surgical intervention, caring for patients, there are things that sometimes we take for granted that can be disastrous if you're not careful. So humility is a huge part of it. And that's why I always say I'm blessed to meet the people I meet and the opportunities I have. what we do is not just patient care, it's also customer service, and like you said it earlier, there's a certain kind of demeanor you have to have with your patients and with the environment and people you work with. Because at the end of the day, if you panic, people panic. And if you show something that's not of the right caliber, it's going to show. So although it's difficult sometimes, you have to remain mature in your ability to control your emotions, control your feelings, and really personify, like, let's move forward. How can we fix this problem? Not be part of the problem, part of the solution, so to speak. So it's a huge world we live in. And, I think this is the toughest job in the world. I really do. Being responsible for somebody else's well-being far overshadows being an actor or being whatever, because that's just all on you, right? Something doesn't go wrong in your life. But when something goes wrong in somebody else's life, based on something that you may have done in the best of intent, that's a very difficult thing, And so that's why our job is not always easy. We have a great intention to help people, but at the end of the day, you have to be humble, you have to be motivated, and you have to be sincere with yourself, with your colleagues, and with your patients, just because these are the things that sometimes, come up.
One of the neat things about this discussion is it's pertinent to our students, Joe.
So much.
The inquisitiveness, the engagement, the passion, the quest for excellence. One thing we didn't even talk about today is money, right? Think about it. You have a mission of being the best doctor you can be and learn as much as you can to benefit your patients. We encourage our students, likewise, to be passionate, inquisitive, and fortunately they are. There's some incredible students.
Yeah.
Our profession's in really good hands right now. These students are amazing. But I think it's important to realize that the opportunities that we have, we need to take advantage of them. And it's not like you said before, go to school, go to 3 years of residency, maybe get a fellowship, maybe not, and then go work the rest of our life. That's not the path of the most interesting and successful people, to quote you, Joe.
It's the path to burnout too, because when you start to stagnate and I don't want to say stuck, because that's not the right adjective, but we know that the things that help people out of burnout are autonomy, skill, perfecting a skill, and having that accountability for satisfaction in your life. You did something that was meaningful and impactful. And when you start to lose some of that, you do just kind of get stuck in a rut. And so having the opportunity, if you feel like you're just slipping into that zone where I'm not enjoying what I'm doing anymore, maybe seek out new training, maybe take a weekend course, something that sparks curiosity or reignites an interest or a passion that you can really start to pursue. Which is where, again, I love that your career was not just a perfectly linear, but that it was these opportunities of learning something, advancing, and then learning again and advancing, because you also are you can appreciate being a student better when you've had experience to back up new things. And so you're a better student, 5 years out of practice or 10 years out of practice than maybe you were, right out of school or right out of residency, because you've had all of the, like you said, that's probably what that person had. These people stick with you, right? We carry them with us forever. Oh, that's probably what that person had. That you look at it through these different lenses, again, to ultimately fulfill that responsibility to your patient, which is to be the very best you can be, or at least get them to the right place. If you don't have interest in something, no big deal. You don't have to be jack of all trades, but there is this whole world of peripheral nerve surgery. It's not something that I know, and maybe I don't have the expertise in it. I'm going to seek out someone that does, so I can, maybe that's where this patient is. Let's get them to the right place.
Yeah. One thing that you made the point was interesting. It was a lot easier to be a learner again after having experience being a faculty member, because it just made it, you realize things, having experienced things as a faculty person that you maybe didn't get. Now you learn it again as a learner. It just makes a lot more sense. So it's actually easier going back and learning something, because you have this perspective and experience as on the other side of the fence. And so when you learn it as a learner again, it just made it easier. So it was actually fun going back and being a student, as long as you just give yourself the humility to be a learner again and not have to implement, and I did it this way. No, you have to just humble yourself, ground zero, but you have your knowledge from what you've experienced, which makes the experience even better, because now you see it from a from a past experience type of thing, and it just makes so much more sense.
Yeah.
You know, it's like, oh, you know, like the light bulbs go off all the time, and it sparks other ideas, other things of how to maybe do something and maybe how to see something. So, you know, and you get inspiration from everywhere, either watching stuff or reading on reading things or whatnot. So just always been the lookout for things that to motivate you.
Such a fun discussion. Roger, what do you do when you're not embraced in podiatric medicine? You have some hobbies or some things that you do to just kind of recharge the battery?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. You know, back in the day, I was DJ Raj. I love
Oh,
DJing. I
DJ
love technology.
Spider-Man Raj.
there
You
you
got all
go.
these new fun nicknames coming out.
So
So
what
now
kind?
you know the backstory, right? So mom's like, no, you can't be DJ. You gotta go into something that and she was right. She was right. But yeah, I enjoy that sort of world. It was fun when I was in high school. But so music, I played drums when I was back in the day. I love to say, I like being athletic at times, but it's a lot harder to be athletic when you're older. I used to, love running, but now it's just painful to run, so I just walk.
That's what I
Just get
do
my
too.
exercise that way. Absolutely, it's great, and lately I've just also been really it's just kind of completely off the tangent, but I've really been into like properties and homes and home remodels and new builds, and I'd love to be maybe a developer one day, just kind of I just love walking to a new home, a new build, having certain styles. I think I find myself watching HGTV all the time. These home reveal shows. I just love watching the reveal and the people's excitement about what they see. So things like that. Of course, faith is a big part of my world as well. Honestly, there's times in your life, whether it's work or not, where it's hard to really maybe talk to anybody because what you're going through is so personal. And that's where faith comes in for me, concepts like prayer, and just asking, God for help. Things of that nature are very beneficial to me. So it's a huge part of my practice. Even before I do surgeries, I'll say a prayer about the case going well. Like I said, every step of the way, if you think about all the people you've operated on that are out there right now, if all that fell apart for the same day, you'd have to leave. You couldn't, it'd be too much burden on one person's soul. So you're thankful that, God allows things to work out, people to do better. It's not just you, it's the ability for you to have help in that sense. So faith is a huge, huge part. And I wasn't always that way. You come into your own, you learn about what you learn. And I'm very much into interfaith dialogue. I love telling people about, I love hearing about what they believe in, and I love to learn about what motivates them as well as what is their belief systems, and also learning about what I believe in. And it's important too, especially when I was a program director. You have to know what people are all about. And it's not just their academics, it's not just their GPA, it's what they believe in, and faith was a huge part of it. I remember one of my residents was, I think it was a Seventh-day Adventist. And I didn't know, like in my simple mind, Muslims have their worship day on Fridays, people who are Jewish on Saturdays, and Christians on Sundays. That's the way I had it. I didn't realize, though, the Seventh-day Adventists actually observe the Sabbath too on Saturday. So he came to me one day and he asked me for Saturdays off from being on the phone. And I'm like, good one, buddy. I know Sundays are your day. So I realized that I was wrong. And so learning about his faith, my point being that learning about his faith was a huge, awakening from like, oh yeah, you know what, Caleb, I'm so sorry. I didn't realize that this was your situation. So, you have to be open that way. And so that's one thing I really enjoy too. I've given lectures on comparative monotheistic faiths. I think that kind of dialogue is missing. In this day and age, sometimes we become very jaded sometimes by what we hear, what we see. But if you have an open dialogue, people get to know you and they get to know what you actually believe in, and vice versa. It's just a huge opportunity to break down barriers and just people to learn, about who you are. So yeah, those are some of the general things that I really enjoy.
That's awesome. What a fabulous discussion. Joe, is there anything else you'd like to ask? Or, I mean, this is
No, I
just a
actually think that
great
was a really
discussion.
beautiful, because we could dive into the concepts of like the whole person, but that is like a whole nother show. But I think that was a beautiful place actually to end, is your friendly neighborhood Raj, and connecting with people on every level that makes them who they are. And I appreciate you taking your time to come talk with us. And
No, thank you, Joe. Jeff, thank you so much. Listen, this is incredibly humbling for me. I am so appreciative. Heck, I'll pay you guys in the future just to bring me on again so I can just talk about.
you don't have to do that.
Next time you come on, we're going to go into a whole bunch of other things like
I
talking.
mean, this was so relaxed. You know, it's one of the few times where it wasn't a lecture I was giving. It wasn't an academic sort of threshold I had to meet. It was just a conversation. I haven't had one of these, I think, just in general, like forever. So that's what I told Joe. Absolutely. Are you kidding me? I'm there, buddy.
Oh, that's awesome. Well, Raj, we are very thankful. And I think our listeners and our watchers are going to just love this episode. So thank you. And to all of our listeners on Spotify and Apple, thank you so much for tuning in. We appreciate you being here every week. And then to all of our viewers on YouTube, my gosh, we really do appreciate you tuning in also. So Raj, we're going to send you one of these Dean's Chat cups. I don't know what your beverage of choice is, but you'll use it, I'm sure.
Well, for sure. So
in fact, it's on the way, actually, because I think we sent a whole batch of cups out today, so it's on the way. And but anyways, until we meet again, cheers, everybody.